Okay, so we're starting our fifth unit, Public Beliefs and Behaviors. So according to College Board, this is Unit 2, Political Beliefs and Behavior. It makes up 10 to 20% of the exam. So you can see here what College Board says you need to know. In general, with this unit, we're talking about political socialization. How do people learn about government and politics? What values are important? What are consequences of public opinion? So we'll look at polling a little bit. And then how do people participate in political life? Okay, so in terms of a couple definitions that you need to know. So political culture, that's really just a set of beliefs that people hold about politics and about values. And then public opinion is something you need to know as well. So I mentioned that we'll look at polling. That is part of public opinion. Public opinion is really just what attitudes people have about their leaders, about the issues, about anything related to politics. When we talk about American political culture, what you need to understand, first of all, is that we basically share a really broad consensus on what values are important. There aren't a lot of differences in these core values that Americans share. So these four values you see that are important. First one is liberty and freedom. Now, let me back up. College Board loves this question. I've seen it on every release test I've looked at. The question always reads something like, all of the following are core values of American political beliefs except for, and the four core values you need to understand are liberty and freedom, equality, individualism, and democracy. So liberty and freedom, we're talking about freedom from unnecessary intervention by government. So the idea that people have liberty to make their own choices, live their lives without undue interference from government. When we talk about equality, what we're talking about is legal equality and something called equality of opportunity. The answer to the question I told you College Board always asks is we don't believe in equality of outcome. So please make sure you understand the difference. When we talk about equality of opportunity or legal equality, we are talking about the fact that everyone is treated equally before the law and has equal chances. What does not happen is we do not have the government legislate then the outcome. So the individual choices people make, the effort they put in, the path they choose then determines their level of success in life, the career they choose, their income, etc. Individualism has a lot in common with liberty and freedom, but individualism is more about the efforts of the individual to create their own life and success. So we highly value the individual and the rights of the individual versus the collective good. And then the last is a belief in this participatory system of representative democracy. What has happened in the last 50 years, though, and you need to understand this trend, is an increasing level of distrust in government and government officials. It is no accident that this happened starting in the late 1950s. So think about some things that happened in this time period. You had the Vietnam War that caused a huge level of distrust as the leaders are telling Americans one thing about the course of the war. When the Pentagon Papers are released, even as people are watching it on their evening news, they're seeing a different course of events than what's being explained to them by their leaders. You had Watergate very soon thereafter. So people have this feeling that politicians are, crooked and lie and do whatever they need to get what they want, even if it involves wiretaps and lying. This decreasing trust in government and institutions has led to a decline in something called political efficacy. Now, I gave you the definition of this term in the last unit, just in case you don't remember. Political efficacy is really about how people feel about their level of influence in government. Does your vote matter? Can you affect what happens in politics? Okay, so then the next question is, what is political socialization and how does it happen? Political socialization is just how political beliefs are transmitted from one generation to the next. And the way it happens is through a couple of different avenues. One of those is family, another is education, and then another is based on social group. So family is the most important and the earliest influence. Education, I'm going to show you on the next slide some ways that happens, and then some demographics affect social beliefs. So your family, as I said, it's the earliest and the most important. It is the group you're exposed to at your, while you're forming your identity. It is also the group you're around the most. Education has lots of ways that you learn about politics. So think about things not necessarily even in the classroom. So class elections and student government teach us about this participatory system of government. You have specific classes that teach you what it means to be an American, U.S. history, civics, my class. And then college graduates have a higher political participation level than any other group. So college graduates vote at a higher percentage and participate in other ways in politics. Social groups are important. Black and white Americans have differing views about what social equality and justice mean, for example. Religious groups have some different and common beliefs, and then gender is important as well. So what we want to look at is this gender difference, first of all. And we're going to look more at this next week or so. So in terms of the gender gap, men tend to be more conservative and favor Republicans, while women favor Democrats and more liberal candidates. Now, as we talk about this piece of the unit, we are looking at predicting how people would vote based on demographic characteristics, you need to remember that we are making generalizations here, and generalizations are not rules. There are exceptions, but we will look at trends that will help you. So this is just to illustrate some differing views that men and women have about government. So for example, look at the third bullet point here. Okay, should more be done to expand good, affordable childcare, or should it be left to individuals? If you think about issues that are important to women, childcare would be one of those. So more women would favor government influence in that area than do men. Another one, look at affirmative action. 36% of women and 52% of men say affirmative action should be abolished. Remember, women benefit from affirmative action programs, so that is no mistake either. These issues that you see here are ones that tend to be favored by more liberal candidates, therefore would be part of the Democratic Party platform, which helps explain the voting trend. We talk about race and ethnicity. White voters tend to favor Republican candidates, while black voters overwhelmingly favor Democrats. And I'll show you some statistics when we look at voting behavior further on down the road. Hispanic voters tend to vote Democratic, except for Cubans, and Cubans overwhelmingly favor Republican candidates. And then Asians tend to be neutral. So we'll look at some of those statistics as well. Okay. All right. So just some statistics to think about in terms of what it means for American politics as our demographics change. As you see here, the projection is by 2050, the white population will be just over 50%, which means minority populations together will be about equal. Now, no one minority group will have that large a portion of the population, so whites by far will still be the highest number, but instead of a majority, it may just be a plurality. So think about what that's going to mean. If different racial groups have different views about what it means to be equal, then that could change American politics. One thing to look at, as we talk about voting in this unit, is race and voting and how things have changed. So remember, the 15th Amendment is the amendment that gives people the right to vote, and it cannot be taken away because of race or because of previously having been a slave. The 24th Amendment prohibited the poll tax because remember some things that the southern states put in place to get around the 15th Amendment, poll taxes, literacy tests, etc. And then the Voting Rights Act of 1965 gives the federal government the ability to oversee voting in areas that had previously been discriminatory and helped enforce the 15th Amendment. So if you look at these statistics, you see what happens pretty quickly. 29% of black eligible voters voted in 1960. Look what happens by 1980, 56%. So it's interesting that by 2000, those numbers were really close to equal. Then age in voting is important. If you look at voter turnout by age, you see how much lower young voters turn out to vote. By far the highest percentage, 65 to 74, and then it starts declining probably because of health and transportation and access. But look at the 45 and older vote. There's no mistake that politicians pay a lot of attention to issues that are important to older voters. It's because younger voters just don't vote. So the 26th Amendment gives 18-year-olds the right to vote, but you can see what has happened to voter turnout. So even with all this clamoring for 18-year-olds to get the right to vote, they really don't take advantage of it right away. Okay, that's where we're going to stop. We will continue with looking at voting behavior, looking at political ideology, looking at elections, and looking at public opinion in the next unit.